All agreements of WTO focus on liberalizing trade. After establishment of WTO, member countries realized that one of the obstacles in international trade also was huge cost and time involved in moving goods from one country to another. Trade Facilitation Agreement was signed between member countries to address all these issues. This session will help you in understanding various features, objectives, and provisions of Trade Facilitation Agreement. Traders from both developing and developed countries face huge cost and time during movement of goods from one country to another. WTO members negotiated and forged the Trade Facilitation Agreement to address these issues. The agreement came into force on 22nd February 2017. According to a WTO study, in a high-income country, trade cost can be around 134% of import duty and around 219% in developing countries. Therefore, the objective of this agreement is to reduce the cost and time needed to export and import goods, simplify paperwork required for export and import, and also to modernize and harmonize custom requirement across all member countries. WTO's engagement in trade facilitation began at Singapore Ministerial Conference in December 1996, after which WTO members formally agreed to launch negotiations on trade facilitation in July 2004. On 12 October 2004, the Trade Negotiation Committee established the negotiating group on trade facilitation. Negotiations were finally concluded on trade facilitation at the Bali Ministerial Conference in December 2013. Finally, on 22nd February 2017, agreement came into force. According to WTO, it is estimated that full implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement will help in reducing global trade cost by an average of 14.3%. Implementation of Trade Facilitation Agreement will contribute 2.7% to world export growth and more than 0.5% a year to world GDP growth over the 2015-30 horizon. Developing countries are expected to enjoy larger gains than the global average, as it is expected that TFA will boost their exports by 3.5% annually and will augment their economic growth by 0.9% each year. Most importantly, two-thirds of all benefits are predicted to go to developing and least developed world. Trade Facilitation Agreement contains provisions for expediting the movement of goods, simplify process for release and clearance of goods, including goods in transit, effective cooperation between customs and other appropriate authorities on trade facilitation and customs compliance issues, provide technical assistance and capacity building in this area. Trade Facilitation Agreement is the first WTO agreement in which member countries can determine their own implementation schedule. Progress in implementation is explicitly linked to technical and financial capacity. There are three sections of this agreement. Section 1 of the agreement contains provisions for expediting the movement, release, and clearance of goods, including goods in transit. Section 2 contains special and differential treatment provisions that allow developing and least developed countries to determine when they will implement individual provisions of the agreement and to identify provisions that they will only be able to implement upon the receipt of technical assistance and support for capacity building. Section 3 of the agreement contains provisions that establish a permanent committee on trade facilitation at the WTO, require members to have a national committee to facilitate domestic coordination and implementation of the provisions of the agreement. Trade Facilitation Agreement also have provisions which insist on publication of all relevant information, availability of information on internet, setting up inquiry point, and guidelines for updating the Committee on Trade Facilitation. We will discuss each of these points in subsequent slides. In the agreement, there is a provision that member country must publish relevant information related to trade facilitation for the benefit of government, traders, and other interested parties. Therefore, information like procedure for importation, exportation, and transit, required forms and documents, applied rates of duties and taxes, fees and charges imposed by the government, rules for the classification or valuation of product, laws, regulation, and administrative ruling related to rules of origin, import, export, or transit restrictions or prohibitions, penalty provisions for breach of import, export, or transit formalities, procedures for appeal or review, agreement with other countries for importation, exportation, or transit, and procedures related to administration of tariff quotas. Members are also required to ensure that following information should be available on internet. Procedure for importation, exportation, and transit, including procedures for appeal and review, forms and documents required for custom procedures of that member country, and contact information of inquiry point. Member countries are required to establish or maintain one or more inquiry points to answer reasonable inquiries of government, traders, and other interested parties, and to provide the required forms and documents. In case of custom union, common inquiry point at the regional level can be established to satisfy the requirement. Members are encouraged not to charge for answering queries and providing required forms and documents. However, in case any charges are levied, then it should be only to cover cost of services rendered. Inquiry point should also answer the queries and provide forms within the time set by each member, which may vary depending upon the nature and complexity of the request. Each member is required to notify the Committee on Trade Facilitation regarding the official place where the relevant information have been published, uniform resource locators of the website, and contact information of the inquiry point. I hope this video helped you in understanding the objective, provisions, and features of Trade Facilitation Agreement. Do tune in for more videos in the area of international business. Thank you.